Um, I think it's almost inevitable that there'll become a time where like both DC and Marvel stop making as much as they do because like I'm not saying that the superhero genre will go quite the way of the western where like there's as few of them made as there are westerns made today,
Right.
but I don't think they can continue at the pace that they are without eventually the public going, yeah, I like this, but like I need something different. You know what I mean?
I do. Okay, so there was a time where I loved them making more and more content. I was like,
Yeah,
make more, please. I'll eat it all up. And that's when they were making intriguing and like a building up a big story altogether, right? Because like before they got to Infinity War, there must have been like 18 movies or something that came out before that, like all like building up to that one thing, like several.
yeah, it was a
Uh,
lot.
yeah, and that was all great. It was fun. Um, Even after Endgame, like people were still intrigued. Like WandaVision was great, Loki was great. I was ready to eat up the content still, but and nobody expects them to have 100% hit rate, but they started missing a lot. After that, and it seemed like they didn't really have a strategy after that. And here's the thing with westerns, like that culture died, but when it comes to comic books, that could be the future always. Like it's a fantasy,
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
as long as you're writing good stuff and you're basing it off of a great storyline, you can do anything with it. You can just keep building and building, and people will keep eating it up. And I feel like they didn't take advantage of Gore the God Butcher. They really effed that one up pretty badly. Um, and like we saw with that Nick Fury show, even Falcon Winter Soldier was okay. Hawkeye was not great. Echo was not great. Like they went on a roll of just making like mediocre to bad stuff, and that's where they kind of lost everybody. So like if they can just go back to that strategy of building up another, like start like phase 1 to phase 5, do it all over again, do a new thing now, you know.
Yeah, you make a good point. Like with the Marvel TV stuff, like we have enjoyed some of their stuff, like Loki and WandaVision.
Mm-hmm.
But like overall, I think there's been more so far, more misses than hits on the Marvel TV side. And I think I would be more excited for their movies if they didn't have any TV stuff, just because there'd be less stuff to keep track of.
Yeah.
Even though, like I said, I have enjoyed some of the TV stuff, and as long as it's good, like I'm all up for it. But
Mhm.
I just don't know if you can spread yourself that thin and keep the level of quality up. And I think that might be Marvel's issues they've had in recent history.
Yeah, I mean, so I do like the idea of keeping the shows and the movies like the shows can be in the same timeline, the same universe and everything, but they shouldn't like have an impact on somebody who just watches the movie. So you can have like their own intriguing storyline, going on, and like their own little locale or whatever they're working on. Like let's say Loki, like with King the Conqueror, like that's not like a big, uh you know from what we understand, it's going to be a huge movie at the end, right? There's going to be like a two-part something like what's that called? Something Secret Wars.
Yeah, Secret Wars.
Do like the impression that we're getting is it has to do with like Kang, right? For so far, anyway.
Well, I think they put the. I don't think they're doing that anymore with the Jonathan Major stuff. I think they're basically going to say, yeah, we wrapped his thing up in Loki season 2, and I
Okay.
think they're just going to move on to. Um, uh, I don't know if it'll be Galactus or something. Or Doctor Doom. It'll probably be Doctor Doom heavy if I had to guess.
And I can appreciate that. Like I do like Kang. I would have loved to see more Kang. As a different actor, of course. Like somebody. They did talk about different people. But and if they wanted to go that way, that's fine. Just don't make it part of the movies. Like keep it in the Loki show. Do Doctor Doom with the movies. Like make him like the villain of Secret Wars and stuff like that. So so that people can follow like a disjointed storyline. Well, not disjointed, but separate from TV shows. So I think most people would appreciate that.
Although, what's weird about the Kang thing is, how you were saying you think people should be able to just watch the movies and still get the whole picture, and that the TV stuff is just side content. Well, it's a little bit jarring for people just watching the movies because, like, Quantumania set up Kang
Right.
as like this big thing and hinted that he would be back in some way. And like, if you didn't watch Loki, then that storyline just goes nowhere.
True, true, yeah.
So it's like they did kind of shoot themselves in the foot that way, to where, like, you know,
You know, but it doesn't have to be part of the main story, like the big build up to Secret Wars. It could just be like a side story, like with Kang. Like um, so Ant-Man is still dealing with Kang, right? Or maybe Tony Stark when he learned about time travel. Remember when he says like time has a way of like getting you back or something? Maybe he had an adventure where he defeated Kang at the end or something. Like make that part of the old storyline, even like with the old Avenger, like Tony Stark, right? And then you don't have to push forward with that being part of like this new, build up.
but if you were to do that story, like, where would you fit it in?
I think it would go between like at some point in Endgame, like when he discovers time travel. Let's say Tony like travels and like sees Kang, and like he goes through his whole adventure and has to deal with him. But it's all through different time periods, and that's why we see Kang later on in Quantumania because he hasn't yet like it's not quite a loop. It's like time is it's a weird thing, right? You don't know where you are at certain points. Like he's in the future, he's in the past, but eventually he meets up with Tony Stark. So maybe that's where like he gets dealt with and it ends there.
But if you were to actually like tell that story, like, would you do it as a movie? And like, what would you call it?
Yeah, I don't know what I'd call it, but I think I think as a movie, yeah.
So you would do like a one-off movie to wrap up the Kang storyline?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. You need to explain like, I mean, but we have seen him in Ant-Man. Are we going off of the Loki series too? Are we still taking that information and putting that in here, or are we assuming that nobody's watched Loki?
You know, the way they did it in Loki, I think you could play it either way. You could say they wrapped up the storyline in Loki,
Yeah.
or you could continue it uh, either way. But yeah, I think even if you had continued it, you wouldn't necessarily have. I guess you could probably conclude it in a movie without referencing Loki season 2. I would think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and in this situation, what you could have is Scott, Ant Man. He travels back to that time where Tony Stark learns to time travel, and like they both deal with Kang together, and that way it ends with Quantumania, like part two of Quantumania too. So like you wrap that up together.
I mean, I would be in favor of them wrapping up the Kang storyline in a movie, but I don't think they are. I don't
I
think
don't
they
think
are.
so
But
either. Yeah, I think it's gonna walk away from it, and we understand why. Like, it's not like they just said, "Oh, we're giving up on the storyline because we don't want it anymore." Like She-Hulk, I guess. But this is more like their circumstances. I think most people recognize that, and it doesn't hurt their perception of what's going on with the storyline, the overall storyline.
but on the other, I would push back on that a little bit, just because, like, unless there was something in Jonathan Majors' contract that made it impossible to recast him,
Mm-hmm.
then I would push back on that, just saying, like, they've already recast several people in the MCU.
Yeah.
So, like, what's the big deal of recasting him? You know what I mean?
No, I'm on
Um,
board. I was definitely on board with continue with Kang. Like, if that's my first choice,
yeah.
but it had to be that it was in his contract. I imagine that must be it because I mean there was so much money in that storyline. Like Loki was doing very well. Everybody was intrigued by Kang. Like he was like very much like considered the next big baddie, and people accepted that. So yeah.
It does seem weird though that Marvel would make that concession in a contract just because, like, you know, it seems like if they did it for him, everybody would insist upon
Yeah.
a "don't replace me" clause or whatever, you know?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't. I don't think they did it with Chadwick Boseman. Like there was always talk about like replacing him or what should we do, and I think it was still option. There was an option to replace him. So like if you don't,
And you would think it, at the very least, if Marvel made a deal like that, they would give themselves like a morality clause, like kind of thing, to where like, yeah, like if you're,
or,
convicted or you're put in some sort of scandal, like we have the option of replacing you.
yeah,
But who knows?
yeah. I mean, you bring up a good point. Like it does make it hard to believe that they just they were forced to give up on this a little bit. And if they didn't, if they weren't forced, then I don't understand why they would give up on it. Like it seems like such a cool storyline. And I've seen who they talked about replacing him with. There's a few options, and they all look great. Like they all seem like solid options, good actors, like people who play in the theater and stuff like that. So
Although to be fair, Quantumania underperformed. Like a lot of people hated it. I was like, I think we all were like pretty lukewarm on it. A lot of people just straight up hated that movie. So, I mean, maybe the audience at large, like,
I
maybe
don't
they
think
saw the results of Quantumania and they were like, we don't need to push this storyline any further.
I think Quantumania was done poorly. I think Loki was done much better.
Yeah.
If we're talking about just going off the movies, I still think you can develop King because there's so many versions of him, and they do show that in the movie, right? That there are different versions of him.
Yeah,
So
they do. Yeah.
I mean, there's still so much to work with there. I think what was bad about that movie was Modoc. The bad humor,
Visually, he looked very strange.
yeah, the terrible humor, the lighthearted approach, like to everything. When this guy is like committing genocide everywhere, he's like that dangerous. Um, and the defeat of Kang at the end by Ant Man. Like these are all like counter to you building up like a serious big bad guy. So I mean, yeah, they could have done that much better, I think.
Well, we've talked about it. I think the MCU suffers that from that uh, on the whole of like tonally they like to keep things so silly and lighthearted that there never seems to be any stakes. And like even though I'm looking forward to Deadpool, like the villain there is Cassandra Nova, who in the comics is like a pretty like formidable like scary villain. But
Mhm.
Deadpool is going to be weighted towards the jokes. So like I wouldn't be surprised if that movie, like the villain, doesn't seem like a real threat. You know what I mean? And it's kind of a silly thing.
I get it, but okay. In the first Deadpool, the villain was very much an asshole, and we hated that villain. Like it was pretty. So he was like Deadpool was himself, but even there was some grit and grime to Deadpool. Like it was almost like he had to make the jokes, or else he would like be crying if he wasn't. And I think that's kind of his thing. Like he suffers, but he deals with it by joking. And we get that; it comes across. It's not like the Marvels, where it's just so ridiculous and
Yeah.
goofy and like so I would say too light. There's no gravity. Um there's like people literally these people are destroying planets, but you don't get that impression. Like there's no sadness over it. Like
Right.
we talked about
Yeah,
that
because
one.
it's always silly. It's always lighthearted. It's always silly. There's no
Yeah,
gravity to the danger at all.
hardly any mourning to anything that, major events like yeah, that was just the approach was really bad. And you can't cut and paste that approach to every movie because it worked in Thor Ragnarok to some
Yeah.
extent. And that's kind of because we didn't expect it in Thor Ragnarok, to be honest. Like we hadn't seen that from Thor, right? So it was a welcomed fresh approach to Thor because there was the first Thor movie, which he was like very serious. He's always a straight man. Then there's the second Thor movie where he was even more like it was more serious and just it wasn't very fun. It was just very blah. And then third movie, we were all very pleasantly surprised by the new look Thor, the new personality and everything.
But I think Thor: Love and Thunder showed though that like it's a
they went
delicate balance, and they went in Thor: Love and Thunder. They went too far the other direction. It got too silly, and the villain wasn't given enough gravity, and
no, no, and you can't do that with Gore the God Butcher. Like he is such a serious villain. Like if you read you've probably read the comics. Like
yeah,
he's done some effed up things, and he is merciless, brutal, cruel. He has no heart whatsoever. Like he's done some messed up stuff to Thor, and they don't even show that
right.
in the movie. Like it's unbelievable. They nerfed him so badly, personality wise. Like, yeah, that was. I saw like a GIF or something, or like a meme. Like there's a scene in The Godfather where the Don Corleone, he's looking at his dead son, and he's like, "Look what they did to my boy." And like, there's literally that's about Gore the God Butcher. Like, look at my boy. Like they them up so badly.
Well, I mean, if you look at the most compelling like villain in the MCU, it's Thanos. Not just because he's like the big bad, but because he actually comes across as serious, you
Yeah,
know, and he actually does serious things, and those things are given weight to them, and
he's taken seriously by everybody.
yeah, and even though there are still like there's still jokes and humor in those movies, but he's taken seriously,
Yeah,
and they
yeah,
react to him as a serious threat.
yeah. And like he doesn't joke around. Like if somebody, okay, so Tony Stark calls him Grimace. He doesn't like have a quick quirp or like a quip to say back or anything. He's just like, okay, you want to play, like like he still brings that menacing tone, and it just brings you back to like, okay, this guy is like real. You don't want to f with him, like yeah, I don't know, like Gore the God Butcher, he kidnaps a bunch of kids, doesn't kill them, nothing. He would kill them in real life. We know that, like in the comics anyway. But like,
Right.
he's just abducting children. Oh, he'll come for you. It's like, oh, that's not Gore the God Butcher, man. Like, and if he did have a trap, it would be a real trap. Like he would not let Thor get off that easy. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, those are definitely the best Thor comics. Is that Jason Aaron run with the Gore the God Butcher storyline?
And like,
So if anybody is interested in reading Thor comics, that's what I would uh, recommend.
and I keep going back to this, but I have to say it. Gore the God Butcher, as great as he is, you can use him as a stepping stone for Null, because Null is the one who created that sword, the Necrosword. So it all could tie together to an amazing villain. It's Gore is amazing. Like you could stay with him for like several movies, if you wanted to. Like, but then you could work your way up and be like, okay, this is where it all stems from.
Well, I think Sony's the turd in the punch bowl there too, because I think uh, Noel is too tied into
I know.
Venom and the symbiotes and stuff like that. That
I
I
hope
think there would be an issue.
I hope to God Sony doesn't try to do something with Null. Please, if there's a God, I don't. If there is one, please.
Madam Web 2 featuring Noel.
Oh my God! I see you found my sword.
I found it in the Amazon while my mom was doing something.
She kills him with an ambulance and a Pepsi. Oh my!
Oh man.
Like Null cuts off the heads of Celestials, but I'm sure Madam Web would be like, oh, I got him with the Coca-Cola sign this time or whatever. It's so stupid. Uh,
The other thing is like you mentioned the Marvels, and I'm just like the villain there was such an afterthought. Like I don't even remember that villain's name. Like she didn't even do much of anything. It's just no depth was given to her. There was no reason to ever care about her. It was just I don't know. What a bad movie.
yeah, and like, don't you notice like both of Miss Marvel's enemies killed themselves at the end of those movies, like the show and the movie? Like she was pointless. Just give them both like whatever they want. They'll die, and you win either way. Like
You just got to wait them out.
yeah, I don't know, man. Yeah, but I am looking forward to Deadpool. I am like really looking forward to Deadpool.
Yeah, I watched that trailer and I'm like, yeah, it looks good, man.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a long movie too. Like, because there's probably a lot to go into. There's like TVA stuff too, I think, or some sort of.
Oh, right, right. Yeah, I don't know if they've announced the runtime, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's like, a 2.5 hour movie or something like that.
I would appreciate a good movie that's 2.5 hours. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, if it's good. I don't mind it being long if it's good.
Yeah.
I heard like someone interviewed like the director of that movie recently, and he said something to the effect that like you don't have to have any like prior like knowledge of other movies to appreciate this Deadpool movie or something. But I'm like, that's not totally true because just the fact that they have Deadpool and Hugh Jackman's Wolverine.
Yeah.
And also in that trailer, they referenced the movie Logan. So I'm like, well, it seems like they expect you to know something about Logan. And then
Right.
also, like, the rumor is that they're going to have a bunch of cameos from people that were in the Fox X-Men movie. So I'm like,
Yeah.
you might be able to enjoy it, but I don't think you're going to get everything if they're going to have those cameos. You know what I mean? So I don't
Yeah.
know. It's
It'd
a
be like
dubious quote.
it'd be like watching No Way Home and not having any idea who Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man were.
Right, exactly. Like, I think you have to have some knowledge going into it to maybe appreciate everything. So I don't know if I believe that quote, but
Yeah, the callbacks are a big deal. Like people like those little. Are they even Easter eggs? I mean, people just appreciate the callbacks. It adds to it big time. I mean,
yeah.
when I saw Daredevil in No Way Home, I was like, okay, all right, that's nice. I like that. And then they had, of course, the other callbacks, and it was just like, all right, man, I feel this movie. Like it's putting everything. I like all these characters, and they're putting them all together. It's like a fun time.
Yeah, it looks fun. Yeah, that's when I saw the trailer. I was like, yeah, this looks like it's going to be a fun movie.
Yeah.
I like I said earlier, like I'm dubious that the villain they'll just seem like another nothing villain, but
Who was the main villain? Deadpool 2? Like, didn't it turn out to be? Oh, there was the headmaster of the school. He was the real bad guy, right?
It's been a while since I watched Deadpool 2. I should actually rewatch that because I know I enjoyed it, but it's been a while.
Like,
Because I had.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, Juggernaut was in that like final fight or whatever.
Yeah. Like he was like the muscle that they had to fight around. They had to deal with him, but the real bad guy was the headmaster, who was like who that kid like because the kid was going to grow up and kill Cable's family, but it changed when he actually, I guess, did they kill the headmaster or did somebody else kill it? Like something happened where he didn't get that lust for murder, I guess.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to rewatch that movie. Like I haven't watched it in a long time.
Yeah, it's a good movie. I like the whole, the team he puts together that dies immediately.
Right.
Yeah. Brad Pitt was one of the members.
Yeah, he was like the Invisible Man, and then he gets electrocuted, and you like briefly like see him.
Yeah, that was fun.
Man, I gotta say, I sympathize with your New Rockstars channel because between like the strikes and certain movies being pushed back, and then like the DC being rebooted, like it is kind of a desert this year as far as like big movies go. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we might have to review Craven the Hunter.
No. A fate worse than death.
Aquaman 2 is where I think we draw the line.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. Although, you know what? After we watched Aquaman 2, like I was like, you know what? It wasn't the worst thing we've ever watched.
No.
Like it wasn't good. It
Yeah,
was not good.
it was just a mediocre like buddy film, I guess. Like yeah, it wasn't bad, it wasn't great, it wasn't good. It was just nah.
Right.
I thought Blue Beetle was better than that, except for the whole grandmother part. But I mean, it had more heart in a lot of ways.
I think
Um,
I would agree with that.
yeah.
And I did I think I mentioned this when we reviewed Aquaman. Like I would have never guessed like that like would have liked it better. Like I would have definitely thought before I saw the Marvels that I would have liked the Marvels more than Aquaman 2, but I ended up liking Aquaman 2 more.
Oh yeah,
Somehow.
yeah. Marvel's really set that bar low. I mean,
But yeah,
okay,
like I'll have to
yeah.
look at the movie schedule this year, but there's not a ton coming out that I really want to watch. Like I do want to watch Furiosa, which I think comes out
Hmm,
late this month.
okay,
I do want to watch Deadpool, which is the summer, like July something. I want to say.
yeah, I imagine so.
I'll probably watch Joker 2, although I'm like I don't know if that'll be any good or not. But did you see the trailer for Joker 2? By the way,
No, I haven't.
it's out. It's worth a watch. Like I'm just curious because it's a musical. Like the movie's going to be a musical, which is an interesting choice. So I'm curious to see that.
I'm usually not a big fan of musicals,
I'm
so
not either, but just putting it in the context of like the Joker and Harley Quinn and a musical, it's so weird that I'm like intrigued by it.
if yeah, maybe they're gonna do something really unique with it. We'll see. Yeah, I'm not up on what DC content is going. When does that Suicide Squad show come out again? Do you know, or are they just starting to work on it?
Um, oh, the Peacemaker show.
Oh yeah, yeah, Peacemaker.
Um, I think James Gunn said he's written it, but he's shooting Superman now, so
Mhm.
I don't think it's shooting yet. At least I
Okay,
haven't heard it. Maybe it'll shoot later this year. I don't know.
so we're not expecting any like DC content for the most part either, huh? Like not even like one or two movies. Like there's a Joker two, and then
I think Joker 2 is the only like DC movie this year.
Mhm,
But we will get the Penguin TV show.
mhm.
And we will, well, I don't think they've announced it yet. There's a chance we could get that Creature Commandos cartoon. Not super excited about that, but I'll watch it.
Mhm. Okay.
But Penguin looks good. I mean, it's unrelated to the James Gunn's like DCU, but
Oh, so it's
it
not
looks
like
good.
Colin Farrell?
It is.
Okay.
So it's in the universe of the Batman, but that franchise is not part of James Gunn's like
Man, okay,
universe.
that's kind of interesting. That's hard to keep track of. Like, okay, so there was the old DCEU, which is completely separate. Then there's the Batman and its universe, which is separate. And then there's James Gunn's vision, and that's separate. That's pretty
Yeah,
complicated, yeah.
it is convoluted, and I'm interested to see Peacemaker season 2 because that has the task of explaining like um how we have these same characters now in a different universe because it is carrying forward John Cena and those actors that were uh, part of the old universe.
Mhm.
Because remember, they had that episode where they had the Flash and Aquaman on
Oh,
it,
right,
so
yeah.
it was definitely in the old universe. So
Mhm.
like he has to find a way of explaining how those characters like come into a new universe. I would presume so.
Well, I mean, okay, are they going to recast the Flash, Aquaman, and Wonder Woman, or and I guess Superman they already recasted, but are they still going to keep that whole Justice League kind of like situation, or are they just going to like get rid of them completely?
I think they're going to recast them because they're definitely not going to rehire friggin' um, the Flash actor
Oh yeah, for sure.
after all their business. Jason Momoa. I mean, the rumor, and I think it's a pretty solid rumor, is he's going to be Lobo rather than
Yeah, yeah,
Aquaman.
I've heard the same.
And then
It's good Lobo actually, because Lobo looks a lot like him in a way. Yeah, just pale.
I don't think they've officially said like they're not going to bring Gal Gadot back, but I don't think they are.
I don't think so either. Yeah. Um. Okay, so yeah, they're gonna keep the characters around, just recast them. All right. So I mean, I guess that does fall in line with like Peacemaker, because like they could just ignore the fact that they look different and just go on from there.
They could, but I mean, I, to me, like for people that watch Peacemaker season one but aren't as hardcore about it as us, I would think they would want to give those people like an explanation.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe he just won't acknowledge it at all. But I would kind of think like something will happen that'll, explain it. I don't know. I think you kind of have to, but
Yeah, I mean James Gunn is like pretty. He's good about like piecing everything together. You know.
that's the other thing is he's such a like nerd like that I kind of, which I appreciate, which makes me think that he will in some way or another like make the continuity make sense.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, even like with that last Guardians of the Galaxy movie, there was a lot of like past and present tied together. Like Rocket's past and you know stuff that we hadn't seen before, had any explanation about. He was good about like tying it all together and like making it meaningful. And I think he definitely brings a lot of heart to every movie he does. And I think part of like the investment that the fan has or the viewer has is like being able to see something that's got good continuity as well. So yeah, I imagine he'll do that.
Well, AJ, we somehow talked a whole nother episode without getting into any stories, but no, that's okay. I don't know. I enjoy these nerdy conversations every once in a while. It's
Yeah,
fun to speculate about this kind of stuff,
yeah,
and hopefully sooner than later there'll be some stuff we want to review on the channel. So
yeah.
we hope everybody will stay tuned for that. But
Fury Road
anyway,
coming out the end of the month, right? So look
yeah,
forward to that.
yeah, for sure. Um, how do you feel about Mad Max Fury Road?
Yeah, the first one was good. I liked it. It is a little over the top, like
Oh,
those
that universe, yeah.
yeah, they're just out of control, like I don't think anybody has the energy to be that way all the time.
It is over the top, but I think in a fun way. Like I enjoy the insanity of it. Um, but I think that'll do it for today's show. So we thank everybody for watching. If you guys will, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can subscribe in audio form on your podcast catcher of choice. Leave us thumbs up, positive reviews, comments, all that good stuff. You can follow me on Twitter/X at Zach Jones Live. That's ZachJonesLive. But that'll do it for all of our shenanigans and poppycock this week. Please, please, please tune in again next week. Bye, guys.
Here.